In the winter of 1878, a mother's love became a death sentence. Princess Alice of the United Kingdom, Queen Victoria's second daughter, had spent weeks nursing her entire family through a deadly epidemic. She had followed every medical protocol, maintained strict quarantine, and watched helplessly as the disease claimed her youngest child. But when her grieving son broke down in tears, maternal instinct overwhelmed medical caution. She leaned down and kissed him, a single tender gesture of comfort that would seal her own fate. 17 years to the day after her beloved father Prince Albert's death, Alice would join him, becoming one of history's most tragic examples of a mother's ultimate sacrifice. But this isn't just a story of death. It's the story of a princess who chose compassion over ceremony, service over safety, and love over life itself. Today, we uncover the extraordinary life of Princess Alice, a woman whose quiet heroism changed the face of nursing, whose jewels told stories of love and loss, and whose final act of maternal devotion has echoed through royal history for over a century. You'll discover how this forgotten princess pioneered modern healthcare, built institutions that still serve communities today, and wore some of the most magnificent jewels ever created for British royalty, including a tiara designed by her father that would later be called cursed by those who dared to wear it. From her childhood as Queen Victoria's beauty of the family to her tragic end in a German palace, Alice's story reveals the hidden costs of royal duty and the price of unconditional love. This is the tale of a princess who lived for others and died as she lived, putting family before everything else. The making of a compassionate princess. Princess Alice Maud Mary entered the world on April 25, 1843 at Buckingham Palace, and from her very first breath, she seemed destined for a different kind of royal life. Queen Victoria, observing her newborn daughter, wrote in her journal that this child would become the beauty of the family, a prediction that would prove prophetic in ways far beyond physical appearance. But Alice's true beauty lay in her extraordinary capacity for empathy. While her siblings played at being kings and queens, Alice was drawn to the suffering of others. During the Crimean War, at just 11 years old, she accompanied her mother on visits to London hospitals, coming face to face with wounded soldiers. Where other royal children might have recoiled, Alice leaned in, her young heart already understanding that true nobility meant service to those in need. Her father, Prince Albert, recognized this special quality in his daughter. His progressive educational philosophy shaped Alice into something revolutionary for a Victorian princess, a woman equipped not just with languages and accomplishments, but with practical skills. At Osborne House, Alice learned housekeeping, cooking and carpentry alongside French and German. She wasn't being trained to be ornamental, she was being prepared to be instrumental. This education would prove prophetic when tragedy struck the royal family in 1861. First, Alice devotedly nursed her maternal grandmother, the Duchess of Kent, through her final illness. Then came the blow that would define the rest of her life. Prince Albert's sudden death from typhoid fever in December 1861. At just 18, Alice became the family's anchor. While Queen Victoria collapsed into inconsolable grief, Alice stepped into the breach. She managed her father's sick room, read to him for endless hours, and when he died on December 14th, she became her mother's unofficial secretary, confidant, and emotional support. For 6 months, this teenage princess essentially ran the British monarchy while her mother remained in seclusion. Dear good Alice was full of intense tenderness, affection and distress for me, Queen Victoria would later write. But this early experience of loss and responsibility had forged Alice into something unique among Victorian royalty, a princess who understood that true power lay not in ceremony, but in service. A wedding in mourning, a life in service. Alice's wedding day in 1862 reflected the shadow that would follow her throughout her life. Held in the dining room of Osborne House while the court remained in deep mourning, Queen Victoria described it as more of a funeral than a wedding. Alice wore her wedding dress only briefly before changing back into mourning attire, a poignant symbol of a life that would be defined by duty over personal happiness. But if her wedding was somber, her wedding gifts were spectacular. The jewels Alice received that day would become legendary, each piece carrying its own story of love, loss, and family legacy. The centerpiece was the Strawberry Leaf Tiara, designed by Prince Albert himself as one of his final acts of love for his daughter. Created by Messrs. Garrard, this very beautiful tiara of diamonds, composed of a rich bandeau with foliage, strawberry leaves, and spires, was more than jewelry. It was a father's last gift, a tangible connection to the man who had shaped her into the woman she would become. From her brother, the Prince of Wales, came a magnificent sapphire parure, necklace, brooch, earrings and bracelet featuring very fine sapphires set in elaborate diamond work. Prince Albert had personally selected these stones before his death, making them a posthumous blessing on his daughter's marriage. But perhaps the most touching gift was the opal parure designed by Prince Albert himself, a cross, 2 brooches and matching earrings, all set with fine opals and diamonds. These pieces would later be bequeathed to Alice's daughter, Princess Irene, carrying the artistic legacy of a beloved grandfather to the next generation. As Alice settled into her new life in Darmstadt, these jewels became more than mere adornments. They were armor against homesickness, tangible reminders of family love, and symbols of the royal dignity she carried into her adopted homeland. The Battlefield Princess. In 1866, Alice's true calling revealed itself when the Austro-Prussian War erupted. While her husband Louis departed to command the Hessian cavalry, Alice, though heavily pregnant with her 3rd child, transformed herself into something unprecedented, a royal battlefield nurse. This wasn't ceremonial charity work. Alice personally oversaw field hospitals, organized the making of bandages, and spent countless hours visiting the wounded. She had found her mentor in Florence Nightingale, the legendary founder of modern nursing, who became both advisor and friend. In a letter dated September 21, 1866, Nightingale arranged for a donation of £50 to be sent directly to Alice, remarking with admiration that the princess does these things herself and possessed great powers of business and of self-denial. This endorsement from the founder of modern nursing positioned Alice as a royal pioneer in public health. She wasn't just playing at charity, she was revolutionizing it. Alice's vision extended far beyond temporary wartime relief. In 1867, she founded the Alice Frauenverein für Krankenpflege, the Alice Women's Association for Nursing Care. This organization was groundbreaking in its professionalism and its non-denominational approach, unusual for the time. The association took over the day-to-day administration of the state's military hospitals and established formal training programs for nurses. But Alice didn't stop there. She also created the Alice Verein für Frauenbildung und Erwerb, the Alice Association for Women's Education and Employment, providing women with vocational training and educational opportunities. These twin organizations worked in concert, with members of the Industrial Association producing bandages and clothing for use by the Nursing Association's hospitals. The crown jewel of Alice's legacy was the Alice Hospital in Darmstadt, established as a permanent institution that continues to serve the community today. This wasn't just a hospital, it was a revolution in healthcare, emphasizing efficiency and professionalism over the religious-cum-amateur approach, typical of many charitable institutions of the era. The weight of tragedy. But even as Alice built her legacy of service, personal tragedy stalked her family. In 1873, her youngest son, Friedrich, affectionately called Fritti, died after falling from a second-story window. The 2-year-old boy suffered from haemophilia, the royal disease passed down through Queen Victoria's female descendants. Though he regained consciousness after the fall, internal bleeding could not be stopped. Alice never fully recovered from this loss. "I feel lower and sadder than ever and miss him so much," she wrote to her mother months later. The tragedy deepened the shadows around her and intensified her devotion to her remaining children, particularly her only surviving son, Ernest. This personal grief, however, did not diminish Alice's commitment to helping others. If anything, it seemed to fuel her determination to ease suffering wherever she found it. She continued her charitable work, her nursing organizations, and her quiet revolution in healthcare, as if service to others could somehow balance the scales of her own loss. The final act, love's ultimate price. In November 1878, diphtheria, one of the 19th century's most feared killers, invaded the Grand Ducal household in Darmstadt. The highly contagious bacterial infection began with Alice's eldest daughter, 15-year-old Victoria, who complained of a stiff neck on November 5th. Within days, the disease had spread with terrifying speed through the family. All of Alice's children, Victoria, Alex, Irene, Ernest, and little Marie, fell ill, as did her husband, Grand Duke Louis. Only the second daughter, Elizabeth, was spared, having been sent away to stay with her paternal grandmother as a precaution. Once again, Alice threw herself into the role of caregiver. Drawing on her extensive nursing experience and her collaboration with Florence Nightingale, she personally nursed her entire family through the dangerous illness. The palace was transformed into a hospital ward, with Alice, as its head nurse, fighting desperately to save her loved ones. For a time, it seemed her efforts would succeed. Most of the children, though gravely ill, began to show signs of recovery. But the disease would claim one victim. On the morning of November 16th, 4-year-old Princess Marie, known as May, took a sudden turn for the worse. The membrane characteristic of diphtheria choked her airway, and she died in Alice's arms. Alice was heartbroken. In a telegram to Queen Victoria, she conveyed the devastating news. "Our sweet little one is taken. The pain is beyond words." It was the second child she had lost to cruel and uncontrollable fate. The kiss that changed everything. In the aftermath of May's death, Alice made a decision that would prove fatal. Fearing that the news would cause a devastating relapse in her other children who were still weak from their illness, she kept the tragedy secret for several weeks. She maintained a brave face, continuing her nursing duties while carrying the immense burden of her grief alone. Eventually, she could hide the truth no longer. She broke the news to her son Ernest, who was shattered and sobbed uncontrollably. In that moment, watching her child's heart break, a mother's compassion overwhelmed a nurse's caution. Forgetting the strict rules of quarantine and the mortal danger of the disease, Alice leaned down and comforted her grieving son with a kiss. It was an act of pure, instinctual love, and it was fatal. Soon after, Alice herself began to show the symptoms of diphtheria. Already exhausted and weakened by weeks of sleepless nights and emotional strain, her body had no reserves left to fight the powerful infection. Her condition deteriorated rapidly. In the early morning hours of December 14th, 1878, exactly 17 years after her beloved father's death, Alice passed away at the age of 35. Her final words, whispered through her pain, were reportedly, "Dear Papa." The cursed legacy. The coincidence of the dates struck Queen Victoria as almost incredible and most mysterious, yet she also saw in it a touching union, their names forever united on this day. The Queen immediately ordered a memorial statue of Alice, holding little May, to be sculpted for the Royal Mausoleum at Frogmore. But Alice's death was only the beginning of a tragic pattern that would follow her jewellery, particularly the strawberry leaf tiara designed by her father. After Alice's death, the tiara passed to her son, Grand Duke Ernest. His first wife, Princess Victoria Melita, wore it during their notoriously unhappy marriage. Shortly after their divorce, their only child, Princess Elizabeth, died of typhoid at age 8. Ernest's second wife, Grand Duchess Eleanor, became the next wearer. The tiara's cursed legacy reached its horrifying climax in the next generation when Eleanor lent it to her daughter-in-law, Princess Cecilia, who wore it to King George VI's coronation in May 1937. Just 6 months later, in November 1937, Princess Cecilia, her husband Georg Donatus, their 2 young sons, and Grand Duchess Eleanor were all killed when their plane crashed into a factory chimney in Belgium. Cecilia, who was 8 months pregnant, appeared to have gone into premature labor during the flight. The body of a newborn was found among the wreckage. In a macabre twist, the strawberry leaf tiara, packed in a strongbox in the plane's hold, survived the fiery devastation completely unscathed. The tiara that had been born from a father's love had become a symbol of inexplicable tragedy. The enduring light. Yet to remember Alice only for her tragic end would be to miss the essence of her extraordinary life. Her story is one of quiet revolution, of a princess who chose substance over ceremony and service over safety. The institutions she founded, the Alice Hospital, the Alice Women's Association for Nursing Care, the Alice Association for Women's Education and Employment, continued to serve communities long after her death. In 1953, her grandson Louis, Earl Mountbatten of Burma, spoke at the Alice Hospital, praising her enduring vision. The point of departure always remained a human being who was ill and needed help, and his needs in war and peace. At his side stood the person willing to give help. Alice's influence extended far beyond her own lifetime. Her daughter Alix became Empress Alexandra of Russia, carrying her mother's compassionate spirit to the Russian court. Another daughter, Elizabeth, became a nun and was later canonized as a saint by the Russian Orthodox Church. Even in tragedy, Alice's legacy of service and sacrifice continued through her children. The language of love. There is profound irony in the circumstances of Princess Alice's death. She was a woman who championed modern scientific approaches to nursing and public health, a student of Florence Nightingale who founded institutions to professionalize medical care. Yet she died from an infectious disease, her fate sealed not by a failure of knowledge, but by an overwhelming act of love. She understood the risks of contagion better than most, but in a moment of profound grief, a mother's instinct to comfort her suffering child overrode the disciplined protocols of the nurse. Her death was not just a medical event, it was a deeply human tragedy. The very quality that defined her life and made her a quiet hero, her boundless compassion, was the very thing that led to her untimely end. Princess Alice of the United Kingdom lived only 35 years, but in that brief span, she revolutionized royal service, pioneered modern healthcare, and demonstrated that true nobility lies not in titles or jewels, but in the courage to serve others, even at the ultimate cost to oneself. Her magnificent jewelry collection, from the strawberry leaf tiara designed by her father to the sapphire parure chosen with love, was ultimately secondary to her true treasures. The hospital she founded, the nurses she trained, the soldiers she comforted, and the children she saved. In an era when royal women were expected to be ornamental, Alice chose to be instrumental. Her final kiss to her grieving son, knowing it might cost her life, epitomizes the selfless love that defined her character. It reminds us that the most powerful force in human history is not the authority of crowns or the sparkle of diamonds, but the simple, profound act of a mother's love. Today, when we see the institutions that bear her name, when we witness the professional nursing standards she helped establish, when we remember the quiet heroism of those who serve others, we see Alice's true legacy. She was a princess who changed the world not through conquest or ceremony, but through compassion. The silent heroism of Princess Alice continues to shine more than a century after her death. A reminder that true royalty is measured not in the jewels we wear, but in the lives we touch and the love we give, even when it costs us everything. Which aspect of Princess Alice's remarkable story moved you most? Was it her pioneering work in healthcare, her tragic sacrifice for her children, or perhaps the mysterious curse that seemed to follow her father's final gift? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear which part of this extraordinary royal story resonated with your heart. If you found Alice's story as compelling as I did, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. There are so many more untold stories of royal women who changed history through their quiet courage and boundless compassion. Ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next journey into the hidden corners of royal history, where love, loss, and legacy intertwine in the most unexpected ways. Until next time, remember that the greatest treasures are not always made of gold and diamonds. Sometimes they're made of courage, compassion, and the willingness to put love before everything else. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of royal history, where we discovered that a single kiss can indeed change the world.